Hi, my name is Ken.
And my name is Jason.
And today we're looking at
Mansions of Madness.
So, oh look, another Lovecraftian horror game. No bias on our part, am I right?
No comment. So, Mansions of Madness was published by Fantasy Flight Games just in 2011, actually, so it's pretty recent. And it was designed by Corey Knizia. And I apologize if I butchered that name. Not that that's really stopped us before.
No, not particularly. So, Mansions of Madness is a survival horror style game based in the Lovecraftian mythos, specifically the Lovecraftian mythos that Fantasy Flight has been sort of building up over time. This is a dungeon crawl sort of type of feel to it, but with a heavy focus on problem solving and puzzle solving and solving basically a mystery.
So the various scenarios of this game, they really touch on a lot of stuff that you would find in Lovecraft stories. And in particular, instead of just having to fight monsters, you can actually like barricade doors, hide from them, which is, typically what you would see in a Lovecraft story rather than, somebody trying to hit it with everything they've got.
Absolutely. So there's a very good sense of theme in this. The Keeper represents a malevolent force inside the house that's actually trying to control monsters and just controls the various effects and is stopping you, the investigators, from understanding the mysteries. First, we're going to go over the components for Mansions of Madness. First, I'm going to show you the map components. So you have various room tiles. There's a ton of different configurations of these. They're all double-sided. This is where you're going to spend most of your time. All of your time, rather. These are the sealed doors. These will be noting when some doors just simply are not on the map. And these are some various room features, and I'm not going to go over all the individual uses of these right here. Now let's talk about the investigator pieces. You've got your investigator figures. Each investigator has their own individual card. Each investigator comes with 4 trade cards, and all the trade cards have individual abilities. Some will give the investigator individual items, or once a game, or several times a game abilities. There are also skill tokens. These replace the clue tokens from Arkham Horror, for those who are familiar. And there's also spell cards. These spell cards are all double-sided. Now let's look at some of the scenario and exploration items that you'll find in this game. So there are several items that are going to be strewn about on the map. We have obstacle cards, lock cards. These are item cards, and they come in various flavors. And these are clue cards. If you'll note, the clue cards and the item cards actually have the same back. Whereas the lock cards and the obstacle cards are very, very distinct from these two. This is so that the clues can be hidden amongst all the other items, and you don't necessarily know where they're going to come up at. We also have the story choice indicators. Each one has a note of which story choice has been made, and this is based on the clues. We have the scenario objective card, and this is based on the storyteller's, or the keeper's rather, choice of the first clue. And then we have the time event deck. So these tokens here are placed on the back of these event cards, and once they reach the number indicated at the bottom of the card is flipped and the scenario or the event is revealed and resolved. These I actually didn't order properly, but they're supposed to go in order from 1, 2, 3 to 5. Next, we're going to go over some of the keeper-oriented cards. We have the attack cards. These come in each different flavor of the monster types. That's humanoid, beast, and Lovecraftian, horror, eldritch, madness things. We have the keeper action cards. All these cards individually are double-sided, so that these can never be hidden from the players. These are always well known as to what they are. Here we have the Mythos cards, and I actually have these separated by each individual type of Mythos cards. There's several different ones indicated by these icons here. And these will be very drastically different depending on the scenario. We also have the injury cards. They come in mental and physical injuries. And we have the monster tokens and figures. So each monster is attached to a base. These are done randomly, and they have... So in some cases there's sort of like a swarm of them, like there's a ton of cultists, but in these cases there's only really a couple Shoggoths, Chthonians, and Bayekis, or Miyagos, rather. Next we have the puzzles. These come in the form of electrical puzzles in various types, lock puzzles, which use these tokens, and then rune puzzles, which there's a couple different, it's just matching the objects together.
So, on to setup. Now, kind of mind the bits that are strewn across the table. There's a lot of pieces, and obviously we don't have as much room to put them as we would like, so, you know, we'll figure out where everything's going to go. So the first step is to choose the story that you're going to be playing, and there's a number of different scenarios that you can choose from. I think there's 5 in the base set, and, you know, there's a bunch of extra expansions that you can get to. So for this one, we've chosen to do the first scenario, the introductory scenario, just because it's, you know, a little simpler and we can, you know, get through it a little easier. The next step is to choose who is going to be the keeper and who's going to be, who are going to be the investigators. In this case, we've kind of decided beforehand that Kenny is going to be the keeper because he's got the most experience in it.
Sorry.
Anywho, and I'm going to be playing the investigator. So the next step is to set up the monsters. So you just want to take all of the various monster pieces and make sure the appropriate cardboard token is put into the bottom. Make sure you mix them up a little bit and don't actually look at the bottom, you know, because there are different stats for each individual monster. But yeah, just make sure that it's the proper thing. So this says Shoggoth, so that's, you know, check. Also, you can see that this Shoggoth is actually painted. Others in the set are not. So sometimes you're going to want to, you know, sort of switch these around because otherwise you will be able to tell which monster is which, and you'll know how much HP it has by process of elimination. So, you know, you've got to try and hide that. Next up, you're going to want to set up the markers and tokens. So thankfully, Kenny is very, very organized and has them all in one nice little box. So basically all we have to do is open this up and set it nearby. So check. Now the investigators and keeper should claim their individual setup cards. So for the investigators, this is going to be their actual character cards, and the keeper is going to claim all of the actions and everything that are associated with the scenario. There are also 2 books included with the game. There's the keeper guide, which goes to the keeper. So here you go, Ken.
Thank you.
And the rules of play also doubles as the investigator guide if you just flip it over. So I'm going to keep that.
So at this point, Jason is going to start setting up the map since he's playing the role of the investigators here. The investigator guide has the listing of exactly how the map is supposed to go, so he's going to set it up to that specification. I'm going to start setting up some of the keeper icons on the side, and then afterwards he's going to go on and do the rest of the investigator setup.
So this is essentially what the investigators are going to see in the guide. So this is for Story 1, the Fall of House Lynch. So first of all, it's going to show you each individual map piece, how they're oriented. It's going to show what doors are sealed off, and it's going to show what features you should place, just through the colored icons here. So I'm going to get that set up first. So this is essentially the map. Now I just have to put all of the various tokens as indicated by the book. So some of these doors are actually going to be sealed, and there are going to be a few like altars and hiding spaces and that sort of thing. Alright, so all the bits are set up, so now it's up to Ken to get this fixed up while I choose all of my investigator stuff.
So for the keeper setup, we're just going to go through this right now. So as a note, to avoid spoilers, if you are playing an investigator and you're not planning on playing the keeper on your first time through and you're actually using this video to kind of get an idea how the game plays, you should skip ahead to this time code. Don't keep watching, just skip ahead to this time code here, and then everything will be all cool. Then you can start talking about investigator stuff again. Right now, this is just for the keepers. It's just you and me, keepers. So first off, as a keeper, you have to make your story choices. So in this case, the Fall of House Lynch has 3 points where you have to choose story choices. The first story choice says, the cause of Walter Lynch's insanity is, and you have 3 options, A, B, and C. I'm not going to go over those specific options, but I'm going to let you know that for the cases of this game, I have chosen option 1B. You take the story choice icons and you actually place it down in front of the map to indicate that that has been your choice. This way there's never any question of which choice you have made, and then the players, if they need to go back on something, can say, oh, you've made this choice, blah blah blah. Number 2 is Walter Lynch's wife has been buried in the... And for this I've chosen 2B. And finally, Walter Lynch's favorite hiding spot is the... And I've chosen 3A. Now, keepers, it is time to get your scenario cards, and let's get those all ready for your players. First things first. You have to go through the clue cards and actually choose out the clues that you have taken. So again, I chose 1B, so I'm going to get clue 1B. I took 2B, so I'm also going to get clue 2B. And finally, 3A, clue 3A. You're going to want to replace the rest of these back to your bag or box or whatever have you hidden from the rest of the players. Now you're going to want to go through the objective cards, and you're going to want to choose the objective card of clue number 1 rather. So in my case I have chosen clue 1B. This is going to be face down and hidden from the investigators until they have successfully found clue 1B, and this token has been flipped over to reveal this. As the keeper, though, you should be aware of what the objective is. So you should read that and understand what the objective is so that you can properly go through the game and know what your objective is. The players are not going to know until, hopefully it's too late, but they may still be able to foil you if they're quick. Now, you're also going to want to set up the event deck. So it's set up in reverse order, so you want to place 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Near the event deck, you're going to want to set up the time counters. As a note, it's very important to remember to put these on the deck because this is what progresses the game, aside from what you interact with the players. Now that we have our clue cards, we can go through the investigator cards. The items, rather. First off, separate out all the you find nothing of interest cards and leave them to the side. Now you're going to want to go through the investigator cards. So in this particular scenario, we need the axe, the elder sign, the fire extinguisher, the lantern, the magic phrase, the nameless cults, and so on until you've claimed all the appropriate exploration cards. Now make sure you take out the appropriate nothing of interest cards. So in this case, the scenario requires 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Next, claim the appropriate obstacle cards and the appropriate lock cards. Now it just occurred to me that I haven't said this yet, but I don't really think it needs to be really said, but I'm going to say it anyway. These should all be hidden from your players. They should not know what you are retrieving. Although if they've played the scenario before, they may have a basic idea of what to expect. You shouldn't really just outright show them what's there. So I've kind of been doing this openly, but I'm also sort of assuming that your players are probably not present or that you're, hiding them immediately. I'm doing this for you, keepers. It's just between you and me right now. Next, you got to build your Mythos deck. So in this case, we're looking for icons at the bottom here, and we're looking for the bat icon, the door icon, and the stairs going up icon. These actually have real names, but we're just going by what they look like to make it easier on you to try to find them. The Mythos deck is then going to consist of these 3 types of cards, or however many cards your scenario demands. And you simply just put them all together in any way you like, and then shuffle them all up. Next, claim your keeper action cards. I've actually sort of done this in advance. Again, these are double-sided, so anyone who looks at the card is going to be able to tell what it is you actually have in front of you. So these are never secret. And finally, we have the step of your starting cards and threat. So I'm going to start this game as the keeper with 1 threat and 1 Mythos card drawn to my hand. Now finally, and I know this has already been somewhat long already, but this is kind of the longest part, is to seed all the rooms with these cards that you've drawn from the various decks. So when you're placing these seed cards, it's very important that, 1, you pay attention to the story choice on the actual seeds. So say an example here, we've got 2A and 2B in the basement landing. 2A has a significantly different configuration than 2B. And it's also very important that you place the cards down in the order that they have listed them in, because most of the clues actually indicate a specific card that will be located in that room. So in the example of clue 1 here, you have to encounter the magical lock before you encounter clue 1. In the case of our clue A, or 3A, you're going to encounter the locked door, then the puzzle box, then clue 2, and then clue 2 is going to indicate that you encounter a magic phrase. So it's very important that you encounter them in this order. So it'll look something like this. As a note, you may have noticed as you were seeding your cards in that there are several rooms that were not indicated to actually have an item go into that specifically, and you're going to also have a little pile of extra cards left over at the end as well. What you do with those cards, you shuffle them all up together. It'll be various actual cards and nothing of interest cards, and you randomly distribute them to each room that doesn't have a card already in it. So this is one room, this is one room, this is one room, etc.
So now that we're all done with Kenny's top secret keeper type stuff, we're going to get into the investigator setup. So in this case, I'm going to be the only investigator, but you know, you can have up to 4, and the setup is pretty much the same. So the first step for the investigators is to actually choose their investigators. So in this case, I'm going to choose Joe Diamond.
The old fallback.
Yep. So you put his card in front of you. You also take all of the various item and trait cards. Now at this point, you're going to have 2 each of the physical and the mental traits. You have to choose 1 of each. And so you can kind of customize your character a little bit in this way, but you do have to choose 1 or the other, and each one will have either a special ability or it'll give you an item or something like that. So in this case, for my physical traits, I'm going to choose License to Kill, which allows me to start the game with my 45 Automatics card. So I'll put that next to me here. And for my mental traits, I'm choosing my On the Case card. And this allows me, once per game, when I reveal a clue card while exploring, I actually gain 3 skill points. And skill points are pretty useful, so that's a good thing. The remaining trait cards and any extra item cards basically go back in the box. Finally, you find your investigator figure, and you place that figure on the start space. So in this case, the foyer.
So as some final points for setup, make sure that the combat cards are sorted appropriately and give them a good little shuffle before you actually put them in. Make sure these guys are accessible to both the keeper and the player, though the keeper is probably going to be the ones dishing these out for when they're appropriate. And hope you never have to fight some Eldritors. Make sure the Mythos deck is accessible to the keeper. Make sure the trauma cards are also accessible to the keeper. Have the spells sorted by their type, and place them somewhere accessible by more like the investigators, but it doesn't really particularly matter. Make sure you give them a good shuffle too, that's important. Have the puzzle tokens for the electrical puzzles and the lock puzzles ready to go. I have these sort of off screen, but I have all the puzzle pieces for these puzzles ready and accessible. The room puzzles, I just leave in little bags until they come up. Make sure you got your monsters around here somewhere. In theory, you're supposed to have all of them out and ready, rather than just the ones appropriate for this game, but you may find this works or doesn't work for you as appropriate. Make sure your keeper cards Your keeper action cards are all readily accessible and all out for all to see.
And now you're ready to play.
So to set the mood, the keeper starts off with the first clue. Light rain falls on your face as you exit the car into the front of the estate. The house is huge, unkept, and shrouded in eerie silence as you approach. You rap on the door and there is no response. A moment later, the door creaks open of its own accord, and you enter the foyer of the enormous mansion. As you set foot inside the vacant home, you notice the faint smell of burnt food. Perhaps someone forgot to turn off the stove. So as far as turn order goes in this game, there isn't really necessarily an appropriate phases in terms of the order that the investigators go. First off, though, the game does start at the investigator's turn. Any investigator may take their turn at any time on the investigator's part of the phases. However, they must complete their whole turn before their turn passes to the next investigator. So an investigator cannot take part of their turn and then pass off to the next person and then finish theirs after the next person. On an investigator's turn, they have 2 movement steps and 1 action step. They can use these in any order, so movement, action, movement, 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 action, action, movement, movement, however they like. The investigator actions can be used to accomplish many things. They can be used to run, which essentially turns the action into an additional movement step. They can use a card ability, so that means that they would use the ability of one of their cards that says action. They may drop items. This is, they may leave items of exploration or their starting items of any kind in a room for another investigator to pick up. They can attack a monster in their room or within their range if they have weapons that are using range. This is, of course, resolved based on the combat dex, not just on a simple roll of the dice, in most cases. Or they may explore. If they choose the explore action, they encounter every card in the room, so not just in their space, in order from the top to the bottom. The keeper takes the stack of cards and reveals them one at a time, or rather they read them to the investigators, revealing the information one at a time. During movement, each step of movement takes an investigator across 1 white barrier into a room or adjacent room. So in the case of this room here, this is all 1 location. This is 1 location. This is 1 location. This is 1, and this is 1. So when moving around, Joe Diamonds is starting off in this area here. However, 1 movement could take him to here. 1 movement could take him to here. Or here. So simply 2 movement would be 1, 2, 1, 2, and so forth. A room is only considered adjacent if there's a connecting feature between the 2 rooms. So in this case here, although this is a set of stairs and there is simply a white border going around here, Joe Diamond cannot simply just jump off the balcony. He must actually go around. In this case, he can go through this door, but he cannot go through here because there's no door connecting. I think that's fairly obvious. If Joe Diamond was going to move into a room that had a lock, they would place their investigator in that room as they would normally to indicate that they have moved into that room. However, the keeper actually reads off the card, and then the keeper and the investigator determine whether or not the investigator is able to enter that room or access that room appropriately. So in this case, there's some sort of thing that is locked, and because I have not given Joe any further items yet, he cannot actually access that room. What that means is that Joe is forced to go back to the room he came in from. So he could not go out to a different room that was adjacent to it and whatever. Because for all intents and purposes, he hasn't actually gone into the room yet. He's just tried to go into the room. And the movement step is wasted. Well, wasted, of course, being a relative term here. He knows what he actually needs to get into that door now, and that might actually be more important than not checking at all. However, if for some reason he's able to get through, like say he has the appropriate key or whatever, he goes in and he goes to the room normally. Revealing the lock, though, does not reveal the rest of the items, so he has to take a separate exploration action to reveal the rest of the things in that room. So, now I'm going to explain the different types of actions. Again, run is simply you just take another movement step. That's very simple. This follows all movement step rules as well, so you don't get any further benefit from running aside from just covering more distance in lieu of actually performing another action. Alternatively, you may take a card action. So in the case of Joe Diamond's current configuration, he has the 45 automatics. And one of the parts is action, attack a monster within 2 range. And if the monster is within 1 range, gain +2 marksmanship. So Joe Diamond would be using the action of this card to attack a monster. That may be a little confusing to some, but understand that the benefit here is that he has used this weapon to gain more range. The action is to gain more range to attack a monster here. In theory, he could just say, I have a ranged weapon, and go to attack a monster. However, this would mean that he has to be within a certain distance. He wouldn't have the range, because this is what gets him the range. And in addition to that, he would not get the benefit of the extra marksmanship if he was within close range of the monster. At any rate, though, cards that give you an action are clearly labeled action. This should not be very hard to recognize. You may drop items in a room. So say an example, if Joe Diamond started off this room and he decided for some reason he didn't want his 45 automatics any longer. He could choose, as an action, to drop his items in the room. Any number of items that he has. And these are, again, exploration items or starting items. You can't drop spells, you can't drop other various things like that. Another investigator, in order to get those items, has to come to that room and actually take an exploration action to pick up the rest of those cards. Investigator may use their action to attack a monster. So in this case, Joe would most likely use his action to gain range, but fundamentally it would still work the same way as an attack would. So regardless of whether or not he took the action of here or he had another weapon, you do have to declare your weapon of choice when you go to make the attack. So in this case, he's using his 45 automatics. And yes, of course, he is using the action to gain the range here, but again, he's still making the attack here. This is what we're talking about. If you have no weapons whatsoever, or if you for some reason chose to, you could choose to no weapon. You can make unarmed attacks against opponents. These generally are not in your favor, but they are useful as a last-ditch effort sometimes. So Joe is going to attack the Shoggoth. The storyteller matches the monster's type with the appropriate combat deck. So in this case, the Shoggoth is an Eldritch monster, so we draw from the Eldritch deck. And then the first combat card revealed, if it is appropriate, in this case it actually is resolved. So there are several different ways that this might come up. Sometimes it might be a sharp weapon or a blunt weapon. It could be a ranged weapon, or it could be unarmed. And there's a bunch of different variants of those things as well. It might just say melee, all these sort of things. But you take the first one that applies to the situation when it comes up. So in this case, the storyteller would read off, there's only one way to damage the abomination. You take 1 damage to test your marksmanship +1. Otherwise, there would be no effect. The storyteller must also let the player know what the passing and failing effects are before they attempt to roll. So on a pass, you would actually deal extra damage, so weapon damage +1. On a fail, though, you are stunned. So in this case, Joe takes 1 damage and tests his marksmanship +1. Luckily for him, because he is within 1 range of the Shoggoth, his 45 automatics are actually going to give him an additional +2 marksmanship. So he's going to be testing his marksmanship +3. So he's got a pretty good chance of making this. He rolls a 2. That's under his skill. He's good to go. So he successfully does the pass effect and deals weapon damage +1. His weapon damage is 3, so he deals a 4 damage to the Shoggoth. Now there are tabs on the Shoggoth here to actually slide in the damage counters and such, but I'm just going to leave it up here so you can see them appropriately. And then, since the Shoggoth has actually taken damage, Joe is now actually allowed to pick up the monster and look at it underneath to actually see what he does. So it's a fairly nasty monster there. He doesn't want to really meet him in the dark alley, or at all. So now Joe has a better idea of what he's facing up against. And the final sort of action is the explore action. Again, the keeper takes all the cards in the room and reveals the text on the card to the players by telling it to them one at a time. So in this case, I'm not going to spoil what's in the first room here, but you do have to, if you encounter any obstacles, so say Joe is investigating over here. This is an obstacle. He would have to actually attempt to complete this obstacle before he goes any further with the investigation, or the exploration of that room, rather. If he does not successfully complete the puzzle, or whatever it is that the obstacle is in this case it is a puzzle, then he can choose to continue moving on, or doing whatever, but he cannot explore past that card until he has successfully completed the demands of that obstacle. Locks are discarded by having the appropriate keys. I think that's fairly obvious. And the case of finding clues. This is actually one of the most important reasons why it's important for the storyteller, or the keeper rather, to actually be the one reading off these clues. Because the clue will often relate to where the next clue could be found, and it often relates to what you actually are going to get as an item for taking this clue. Next, we're going to go over making checks. All checks in this game are made with a D10, and always compare to a trait of some sort. The investigators will be using the traits on their trait cards. The storyteller, or the keeper rather, will be making trait checks with other things potentially, but it's always roll the die. If it's equal to or lower than the trait that you're rolling against, then it's a success. If the result is greater than the trait, the check is a failure. However, results of 1 are always a success, regardless of what the trait is. And results of 10 are always a failure, regardless of what the trait is. So it's always possible to succeed a check, and it's always possible to lose a check, no matter how good or bad you are at it. Next, we're going to explain skill points. So Joe over here actually has 3 skill points. Skill points are hard to come by in this game, and you only start off with a couple, and you don't get any back generally. Joe actually has the ability to gain more later on, but that's a fairly special ability, and also used once per game. Skill points can be spent by an investigator to add their luck, which is their luck trait, to the check before they roll. It's very important that they have to make this this decision before they roll the die, because they can't choose to just add it in later on. The skill point is spent, of course, regardless of whether or not it's a success. The player still benefits from this if for some reason they're allowed to re-roll. So if they're allowed to re-roll the check, then they still get that luck bonus. However, whenever you're rolling luck, you can't spend a skill point to add your luck to the check. You can never add luck to luck. When you're rolling a luck check, you really are rolling a luck check, because these are generally everybody's lowest traits. Skill points can also be added when trying to solve a puzzle. Essentially, your luck can be added to your intellect for the purposes of determining how many puzzle actions you will get. So again, just to reiterate, skill points are actually a very limited resource and should probably be used fairly sparingly unless you're in dire straits. Now, there's a couple specific checks you're going to be making, and these are the horror checks and evade checks. A horror check is made whenever a monster enters into a room from another room, or is simply placed in the room as one or more investigators are in. All investigators in this room make a check. Horror tests are willpower checks, and these are modified by the monster's horror rating. So in this case, the Shoggoth has a horror rating of -4. So it's pretty terrifying. On a pass, there is no effect. However, the investigator will have to make this horror check again every single time the monster enters the room or a new monster is placed. On a failure, the investigator takes sanity loss. So they take this mental damage, they put it on their card, and this indicates that they have been damaged mentally. Next, we have evasion checks. An investigator must make an evasion check against every monster in the room before attempting any non-attack monster actions or a movement step. The check is based on dexterity, and it's modified by the monster's awareness. So in this case, a Shoggoth has an awareness value of 0, so it doesn't actually modify the dexterity. In the case of a Chthonian, though, a Chthonian gives a -1 to this check, so you would be making the check and -1. Some monsters will actually even add to your check. Things like zombies are actually very slow and easy to avoid. So on a pass, there's no effect. On a failure, though, the monster may inflict their damage on the character. The monster's damage is actually shown in an icon similar to the damage on your weapon cards. So the monster simply inflicts that damage on with no further effect, unless the monster actually has some further effect when it does so. Regardless of the results, though, the character is not restricted from performing the rest of their actions in whatever way. And they don't have to perform an evasion test every single time that they try to do a non-attack action. They simply just do this the first time they're contested, and then they go on from there. However, if they ran into more monsters that they have not made evasion tests against successfully or unsuccessfully, they must then make evasion tests against them. So if Joe Diamond was in this space and the Shoggoth was here and he's trying to get past him, and there was a Chthonian in this space over here, and Joe was trying to run past the Chthonian or the Shoggoth and get up to here for some reason, he would have to make an evasion test and then get damaged or not. So that's one step. One more step to get into here with a Chthonian. And then if he wanted to move past the Chthonian, he would have to make another evasion test, being damaged by the Chthonian or not.